for God's plan for my life. This, essentially, it's trading control and selfishness for submission. This I think, is the fundamental question of the Christian faith. It's not, well, was Mary a virgin because she had other siblings, after that, was God, you go to purgatory before, all that stuff, that's like window dressing. It doesn't really matter. Here's the core question of your faith. Will you submit to the lordship of Jesus Christ? Will you do what he commands you to do? That's it. And the reason that's it is because if you don't answer yes to that question, you're not going to do anything else, right? If I don't say, God, you're my Lord and I submit to you no matter what, then everything else in Scripture becomes optional. I'll read it as an inspiration. Oh, that was an interesting idea. Oh, I like the laying your life down. That's cool. I should be a good person. That's not what he's saying. He's saying lay your life down for your friends, not, help people out when it's convenient to you. But if you don't answer that first question in the affirmative, yes, God, you are Lord of my life and I will do what I command you, then why should you follow all the really, really tough stuff that's going to come? And again, a lot of joy that comes from that too, but we're going to try and get the joy stuff without the tough stuff. And that's not the kind of relationship Jesus is calling us to. He's not calling us to be fans. He's calling us to be followers, to be committed, to be all in. And so with that question becomes, this next question is, do I believe that God's plan is better than my plan? Do I actually trust him? And this is part of why we answer the first question no, is because we don't think God's plan is better than our plan. I think my plan is the best plan. I think my plan to be comfortable and live this middle-class life and not really challenge myself or push my boundaries, I think that's way better than saying, if you have 2 coats, give one to the poor. Like, I saved a lot of money to get that second coat. Okay, that's a little weird. I think my plan is better than God's plan. And so because we don't trust him, we don't commit, and because we don't commit, we don't live these things out. So this is really the foundation is are you going to submit to the lordship of Jesus Christ? This is the original sin in the Garden of Eden, is Eve saying, you know what, God said this, I think my plan is probably better than God's. If you think about this from a logical sense, there's no way it makes sense. Okay, creator, infinite, omnipotent, designer of the universe. That's me. I think my plan's better than God's plan. Sin's not logical, okay? But it happens. We all adopt this stupid mindset. And I think about this, there's so many levels to this. Like, if I believe God's word, if I believe his plans are better than my plans, I would pray more, I would give more, I would sacrifice more. Like, my life would just look so different. But again, I'm playing by my rules, not by God's rules, and that's what's limiting me. C.S. Lewis has this analogy when he talks about this, and he says, as human beings, we're kind of like kids making mud pies in the backyard. I don't know if any of you guys ever did this whenever you were growing up, but you're sitting there in your underwear. I don't know why all my memories, I'm always in my underwear. I'm like in the backyard, like in a puddle. And I'm taking dirt clods and checking my brother. But anyway, one of the things I'm doing is I'm making pies out of mud. And this is the analogy he uses here, without the underwear part. That's me. And he says, and the mother calls you from the kitchen and it tells you to come in. Hey, come in and get cleaned up. We've got a banquet prepared. Dinner's ready, Ding, 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 ding. This is an amazing, incredible banquet. And you're sitting there with your mud pie, and you're like, I can't leave my mud pie. I mean, spent a lot of time making this mud pie. I don't really want to go inside. And so you pretend that you don't really hear your mom, and maybe I'm the only one that did this, but you kind of ignore, and then you get in trouble for not coming in on time. But that's us, is there's this banquet inside for us, and we're sitting with our mud pie. And as long as we're sitting in our underwear in the mud puddle with our mud pie, there's no way mom's letting us sit at the table, right? We're missing out on this incredible banquet because in our small child brains, we can't imagine what could be in there that's better for us than what we have in front of us. I think about trying to convince a 5-year-old to hey, I'll give you $1 today or $5 tomorrow, and they're like, give me the $1 today. They can't delay gratification. They can't imagine what the next thing can be, and we're like that in a much worse way because our temporal life is right in front of our nose, and that's all we see. God says, I have these great things for you, these amazing things. That your life is not just this little thing. Your life right now is just a vapor. There's so much more beyond that. You live this way. This is the path to true joy. And we see, this is a mud pie. I mean, it's like a really good-sized mud pie, and we're not willing to go inside. Augustine said something similar. He said, God's always wanting to give us things, but he can't because our hands are full. Okay? God wants to give us things, but he can't because our hands are full. Our hands are full of the mud pie, and so we can't eat at the banquet. And so the question is, are you going to trust God enough to set that mud pie down and go in and have the banquet? Doing this, believing that God's plan is better than my plan, forces us to make choices that look really weird to other people that don't believe the same thing. We're going to do things as Christians that other people are going to say, that's just kind of silly. In a really small way, I think about my cousin Eric. He's probably 6 years younger than me. He had an Xbox growing up, which I was super jealous of. And so anytime I come over, we're playing Xbox. And I think I was in high school. We were playing Halo. And of course, my cousin plays like 12 hours a day, so he's really good at Halo. And I noticed, like, I don't know, after a few games, I've won like a few of these games, which should never happen based on the laws of the universe, because my cousin Eric is super good. And so finally I'm like, Eric, are you like throwing the game right now? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, why? He's like, well, I figured if I beat you really bad all the time, you wouldn't play with me anymore. I'm like, wow, yeah, that's really true. Yeah. Here's what that made me think is, when I'm playing video games with someone or doing anything with someone, so much of the time my goal is to beat that person. His goal is relationship. My goal is to win. And so throwing a game in my mindset was totally ridiculous. Like, why would you ever lose this game intentionally? But with his mindset and his rationale, hey, the goal for me is to build a relationship with my cousin, this is the most logical thing. It makes total sense. And I think in my life, man, if my goal is to win in life, like it is so much times, to die with the most toys, to accrue the most stuff, okay, well then my life path of making money and cutting corners and ignoring my family, that makes a lot of sense. Like, that's the way to win that game. But if the game is about knowing Christ in his suffering and achieving glory and building an eternal relationship with my kids and leaving a legacy, this plan doesn't make any sense at all. Sure, this is what everybody else is doing. Everybody else is playing to win. And they are going to win that game, but that is not the game. That is mud pies. Okay? I want the banquet. And so when we lay down our plans and take up God's plans, it's going to ask us, it's going to force us to do things that will seem stupid to other people, but are going to make 100% sense with this kingdom mindset. So that's the first trade. If we're going to lay our lives down out of love, the first thing is we have to trade our plans for God's plans. The second one is trading the temporal for the eternal. And I've already gotten into some of this a bit already. It's this idea that we're trading our happiness, our contentment in this really small, narrow window of life for this deep and abiding joy that lasts forever. Jim Elliot famously said, the missionary who went to work with indigenous people and was killed in the process, he said, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose." He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. Again, it's like choosing to go a place where you're going to die doesn't make any sense if I'm playing by the set of rules, the typical set of rules. But it makes 100% sense when I understand this is not the game I'm playing, it's a different game. So many of us are playing the wrong game. Randy Alcorn, in his book, The Treasure Principle, tells a story of a guy that goes on vacation, and the setup is this. He's building his dream house at home. He's been saving his entire life to build this dream house. And his boss surprises him and says, "Hey, you know what? I want you to take 6 months, go overseas, go to Italy, enjoy time with your wife while your house is being built. We're going to pay you. Just like enjoy that time there." And so he goes to Italy and gets this little apartment in Rome. And while he's there, he's there for 6 months. So you have some furniture. You can't just sleep on a wood floor for 6 months. So it makes sense to buy a bed and buy some chairs and stuff like that. But he knows, hey, my house is being built back in the States. So my paycheck comes through. Yes, I could spend all my money furnishing this house and buying things here. But number one, every dollar I spend here, I'm not spending back on the house. So when I come back in 6 months, the house is not going to be ready if I blow all my money here. The second thing is that everything I'm buying here is not coming with me. I'm not packing up all this furniture and shipping it back overseas. I'm already building a house. All this stuff is going to be wasted. So I need to buy enough to live comfortably, and I want to enjoy the time while I'm here, but I know my money's really not for this, it's for this other thing that I'm investing in. This is our lives and our material possessions. It's understanding, yeah, I've got stuff right now, and I'm here for a period of time, 40, 50, 60, 80 years, So I'm not going to live probably like on a wood floor, but I've got to know the money I have now is not for now. It's for this thing I'm looking forward to. And the quote that Randy Alcorn uses to tie this all together, he says, you can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. You can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. And I love the idea that, like, you know, the investments we make now pay dividends in eternity if we make them in the right way. Yeah, you never see people buried with, you know, all their furniture and their goods and stuff, and if they do, it dies on earth. They can't take it with them to heaven. But the investments that they make with their time and their money now, of serving others, of giving generously, they can send it on ahead. That can be waiting for them, those joys when they get to heaven. Yeah, and I think that's a big shift that we have to make, again, because the temporal is right in front of our nose. It's so hard to think of, to continually be aware of the eternal, and even to believe that it exists. It's so easy to get caught up in the rat race that everyone else is living and miss out on these eternal plans. You know, if I just wanted happiness in the moment in life, I would never do dishes in my house. I'm not a fan of dishes. I was telling a guy earlier, like, when I used to do dishes as a bachelor, I would turn on ESPN, and it would take me like an hour to do dishes because I'm trying to, like, distract myself from realizing I'm actually doing dishes. And it would just take forever. So if I wanted happiness, I would just never do dishes. I would throw everything away, I would buy paper plates, and I would never touch it. But I'm married now, and I can't do that. So if I wanted happiness, I would never do dishes. But if I want joy in my life, you better believe I'm doing dishes, because, man, I'm going to take care of my wife and family. You know, they say sex starts in the kitchen, and that's true. But what they don't tell you is that it starts with an SOS pad and some Ajax soap. Okay, that's really how it happens. Because if I want my wife to love me, and I want her to know that she's cared for, it means laying my life down in this really small way.
Yeah.
And if I'm just thinking in the short term, just thinking temporally, I'm not going to do that. But if I understand that, hey, my marriage is not this transactional thing, this is a long-term relationship, then doing dishes makes total sense, because that's the way to love my wife well. So in Romans 8, this idea that temporal versus eternal kind of comes into play. Paul says, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided, here's the key part, provided that we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. We're heirs with God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided that we suffer with him in order that we also may be glorified with him. Here's the ticket. Okay, this is what it costs to get in. Please come. This is what it costs. And Paul goes on to say, you know, if you think of that ticket and you think, gosh, that's kind of a high price, he says, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not even worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed in us. Right? The price you're paying now, you're that little kid, you're like, 25 cents? Oh my gosh, I only have 25 cents. And you're saying, 25 cents, you get a Corvette. Okay, this is a really good deal. Let me explain to you how good of a deal this is. And he's saying, this is a really, really good deal. Yes, suffering seems like the worst thing on our minds because we think in this temporal mindset. But man, think about the glory that God's going to reveal in you. This is a no-brainer. You absolutely are going to do this. So you can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. The way God is shaping you now is creating something for eternity, not just for the temporal world. But the beauty in this is that with this, the bonus is that you also get great joy now. Not all the time, it's not always going to be comfortable, but when you think about living a life where you're laying your life down out of love on a regular basis, where the people around you know that you care more about them than you care about yourself, that you see them as eternal creatures that are worthy of love and affection, even if they can't do anything for you in return. Let me tell you about the kind of teams that you will have around you, the people that are going to want to work with you. Let me tell you what your kids are going to think of you when they talk about you at school, what your wife tells her friends about you. Man, talk about joy that surpasses like the fleeting happiness you get from checking out a night and playing video games instead of helping your wife vacuum the house. Man, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing those long-term investments pay off. So, as we think about laying our lives down out of love and becoming like Christ in that, the first trade we have to make is trading our plans for God's plans. The second trade is trading the temporal for the eternal. And the last trade is trading the grandiose for the minuscule. The grandiose for the minuscule. In other words, trading these flashy achievements for the small but meaningful things. I don't know how many of you else have this really kind of macabre vision, but probably like once every 2 months I'm sitting in church and I imagine an active shooter comes in the building and everybody starts to run for the door and I like kiss my wife real quickly, tell her I love her, and I go to tackle this guy and I get killed, but I take him down and I like die heroes. Anybody else ever have a vision like that?
I think that like every weekend.
Every week.
I swear, it's really weird.
Okay, you need to seek counseling.
I know. It's bad. It's not that I want to be some hero. It's just that I would do that for
Right.
everyone in the body of the church.
It seems like just a total logical decision.
It would just for sure.
Is
Gives you
anybody,
goosebumps,
Yeah, exactly. Now, without, you don't have to raise your hand, but think to yourself, like, how many of you feel like, okay, if a guy comes in with a gun, I'm going to take a bullet for my family, okay? How many of you feel like, yeah, that's like pretty sensible, right? Has anybody ever been shot in this room?
Shot, yeah.
Have you seriously ever been shot?
Yeah, in the foot.
In the foot? Could you describe how that felt a little bit?
It hurt. My brother, of course.
I mean, I have never been. I've shot myself with a BB gun before, but it doesn't really count. But I imagine, okay, this piece of molten lead traveling, depending on the caliber, several hundred to 1,000 feet per second through your body, ripping a hole, destroying bone and muscle. That does not sound like a very pleasant experience to me. But I think most of us in the room would gladly step in front of that to protect the people that we love. But then you get asked to like change a diaper. And you're like, this would be a great time for a gunman to come in the house and I could just die right now, He was about to change a diaper, but then a gunman came in, he went down, he was a hero, I'm so guilty of this. It's so much easier for me to fantasize about like going out in a blaze of glory than doing the daily grind. I mean, speaking of diapers, kids poop a lot. Like 6 to 12 times a day or more. Sometimes it like leaks out through cracks and crevices and gets on stuff and you have to touch it. And this is where sometimes I want to shoot myself. I'm not gonna wait for the active shooter, I'll take care of it myself. But I think, as we think about our legacies and the stories that we're writing for ourselves and for our kids, and we think about the character that we're forming, and we think about how we're honoring God, it is the small, daily, poopy things that create that stuff. It's not the flash of glory. Okay? It's not what defines our legacy. It's the dirty diaper. And it's so ironic to me that we would give everything in a moment, but we can't give a little bit all the time. I can give it all in this one small slice, but I can't give you one small slice all the time. That's a very backwards, upside down way that we think. And I'm just going to say, most of us think that way. But if we're really going to lay our lives down to love, that's what it is. It's not the flash of glory, it's not the grandiose, it's the minuscule. It's the dailiness of it. We are the sum of our moments. The choices we make every day not only determine who we become, but who we're remembered as, and what our kids think of us. Again, the good news for this is that this gets a lot easier over time. Going back to the dishes, again, that may seem like a very small thing to you, but it was a really big deal for me. When I started trying to help my wife out around the house, well, first of all, I was really good at the words of affirmation side, 5 love languages. So when my wife was in school and she was working, I would tell her all the time, hey, you got this, you're brilliant, I believe in you, go for it. You can tackle anything. And she appreciated that for a little while. And then one day she was like, that's great, but could you just do the dishes? If you really want to help out, could you just do the dishes? And I'm like, but you're so good at the dishes. You're the best dishwasher ever. And she called my bluff and was like, okay, if you really mean this, you really fully support me like you're saying, here's the way you can do that. And man, it was like grinding off my fingernails with a cheese slicer. It was just like, I don't know why for me, but growing up, maybe in a more traditional house where my mom did that all the time, it just felt like emasculating. I did not want to do that. So then when we left that season, moved somewhere else, and my wife was working full time and going to school, and I was just going to school. the kind of traditional gender roles were flipped, and I was like the one who had more stay-at-home time. And so it's like, gosh, can I really expect you to do everything you were doing now? That doesn't really make sense. Okay, well, I guess I'll take on cooking and laundry and dishes, and if you can handle cleaning, then we can find a way to make this work. And just diving into that, again, at first it felt like the most terrible thing, but then I recognized that it was getting easier over time. It went from being like the most awful, terrible thing in the world to like, I'm clinking the dishes really loudly so that Emily notices that I'm scrubbing something, You guys ever do that? Like, I washed a bowl, It's like, what are you, 5? This is not like a macaroni necklace, okay? You washed a bowl, congratulations, you're 30, go wash another bowl, But I felt like it was this, massive accomplishment to like, okay, it's not that bad, to like, oh, I don't mind, to, hey, well, it's nice to have a clean house, and like, not a big deal anymore. That was a great joy, because for me, it felt like, if I hate doing dishes this much and you're asking me to do this all the time, again, active shooter, anywhere around? That's what it felt like for me.
What about a dishwasher?
See, we have a dishwasher, but it's like the big stuff, Well,
Okay,
let me be honest. My wife washes everything and then puts it in the dishwasher. Anybody else married to a person like this? Okay. Talk about laying your life down in love. It's washing something twice. For me, it just is not it. You know what? It's what my wife wants. I'll love my wife in this moment. So, Gary Thomas uses this analogy to talk about caring for your spouse and loving those around you. And he said, imagine that this person is a plant, and let's say it's a fern. I don't know how many of you know anything about plants? Love ferns. So you take this fern, you're like, oh, awesome! Hey, I got this plant. I'm gonna, give it a lot of sunshine. I'm gonna water it a ton. This thing's gonna grow. Well, if you know anything about ferns, like they actually don't need a lot of light. They're gonna kind of wilt if they get too much light. And if you overwater plants, then they'll start to die. And so you get to the end of your week and you got this plant that's withered up, and you're like, man, I took such good care of this plant. But you look at the plant.